Hey, what's going on, Los Angeles? What's up, Ramley? Welcome to the Ram Skinny here on the LAFB network. Happy to have you all with us, as always, as we get into this Rams 2025 draft class. We've let the dust settle a little bit. It was a busy draft weekend, and then, some days off and whatever, and we just kind of wanted to let the dust settle, give us some time to think about these players, and now get on and talk about them. So joining me, as always, Mr. Skinny T. What's up, brother? How you doing?
I'm doing good. It feels like an eternity since we've talked
Yeah.
on this particular show. We talk just about every day, but yeah, it feels like a long time has
Yeah.
passed.
I know.
Count,
We went live after day 2, and then I guess we haven't been on since then. So that was Friday.
yeah, it's weird how the calendar works.
Yeah, I know, right? I guess that's how days keep going by, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, excited to get into it. It's we need some uplift with LA right now, with the Lakers getting eliminated shockingly in just 5 games to the Wolves last night. Clippers are in elimination game tonight against the Nuggets, and our beloved Kings also traveling back north of the border to Edmonton to potentially face elimination tonight.
Which
Crazy.
one's your most surprising, ouster for LA teams?
For me, it's the Kings, honestly, because I think the Kings were the hottest team in hockey, one of them to end the season. I mean, they ripped off like a ton of wins at the end of the season. The way they started the series, going up 2-0, and they should have, maybe should is a strong word, but they easily could have won both games in Edmonton. They were winning game 3. I mean, I was at your house and they were up by like 2 goals or whatever, and then ended up losing. So yeah, it's crazy they lost 3 straight. So Lakers, I think, are surprising because they were also really hot, the 3 seed. But and then the Clippers, I think, they were surprising to be as good as they have been, to be honest. So I mean,
Oh,
they were kind of the Cinderella story this season. So for me, it's the Kings. So hopefully the Kings can storm back. My Avs are down 3-2 also. So tonight could be a rough night for me. If I mean, I guess I'm technically a Nuggets fan too. So one way I'm happy if the Nuggets win, but if the Avs lose, the Kings lose, we'll see.
it's a beautiful thing. Yeah, I mean, I think the Lakers are probably the most predictable in my opinion, even though they have 2 of the biggest superstars in the league. But they had no big man,
Yeah.
and Luka Doncic doesn't play defense, and
Yeah.
and now we got JJ Redick out there saying that not everybody was in championship form, in championship shape. So
It's last thing, and then we'll get into Rams talk. But it's obviously relevant to LA. So I just think it's so funny how in the trade, and we cover it obviously on site with editorial, but when the trade happened and everyone was like, "What is Nico Harris?" And not even after, I mean, literally 2 weeks ago, still like Nico Harrison should be fired. What are you doing? Luka is a generational player. Not even 8 hours after the Lakers lose, everyone's like, oh, maybe Dallas was right. Oh, maybe Anthony Davis was right and should have stayed in LA. Oh, Luka's not actually that good. It's like how crazy everyone flip flops. And the NBA media is the biggest flip floppers of all sports media by far.
yeah, you can go find some Charles Barkley quotes going in any direction you want. So,
Yeah,
but not us. We were consistent here. The
yeah,
one I've been thinking about, one of my takes, and this is a Rams take. I was saying that, late last season, Stafford was, kind of didn't look like his peak form. Maybe he had lost a bit on some of those deep throws. I don't know if I ever covered this, but he had a rib injury. So, I
yeah,
was right and I was wrong at the same time.
yeah. You were correct. Just didn't know the exact reason, and there was an actual reason
Yeah.
for that. So speaking of Stafford, real quick, and then we'll get into draft talk. I mean, his contract details finally come out.
Yeah.
So that was good to see.
He's officially signed.
Officially signed. Only took 2.5 months, but hey, he's back, and his cap hit goes down this year, correct?
Yep, just a hair, but a couple million between friends.
Yeah, what's a couple million between friends?
Yeah, exactly.
So yes, so officially, welcome back, Matthew Stafford. We all knew it was getting done. The handshake agreement was made back at the combine or right after the combine, but now pen has hit paper, and so everyone can truly breathe easy. And I think the bigger thing is that now that this happens, now we don't have to worry about it bleeding into mini camp, OTAs, training camp. This season's done. Now we'll have to deal with it again next season. And there was no quarterback taken in this year's draft, which we were pretty sure would happen, and it did not. Although I think, to our credit, after day 1, we've said it was much more unlikely, I think, based on how things went. But so speaking of with the draft, we're going to go. There's only 6 picks. We were going to break it last year. There was 11 last year. So we kind of did a different, best pick, worst pick, sleeper. But when there's only 6, like if you have 4 categories, you're just naming. So we're just going to go kind of pick by pick and talk about them, see where they fit, see who we think can start. And then next week, guys, we will hit the UDFAs. I think a really nice UDFA class. The Rams always seem to find 1 or 2 guys in their UDFA class that play. Last year, multiple played throughout the season. And so we'll get into that next week and really deep dive into all those. But yeah, just overall, before we go into each pick, what was your overall thoughts of the draft? Do you have a grade for the overall draft?
Sure, I can spin one of those up. There's 2 things I'm shocked by. The quarterback one is definitely one that I'm, it's not a head scratcher, but it's related to my second point. There was a bunch of quarterbacks that fell. Would it have been interesting had they, taken a flyer on Shedeur Sanders? Definitely. Jalen Milroe, maybe that would be interesting as well. But, with that trade back, they've got it locked up for the first round. So if they don't spend those this year, which you got to keep that on the table, if they're in a Super Bowl and if they're in a Super Bowl kind of contention, 6 weeks into the season, that trade deadline looming, you got to keep that on the table. One or both of those first rounders, if there's a discontented somebody out there, they're going to chase after him for sure. And they should. You got to chase the Super Bowl when you can. But the other one is no cornerbacks, no defensive backs taken in this draft whatsoever, which makes, if you go over the last 3 drafts, they've taken 1 cornerback, specifically cornerback. They took Cam Kinchens last year as a defensive back, as a safety.
Yeah.
But Tre'Davious Tomlinson Hodges, or Trey Hodges as they call him, not even on the team. That was a 5th round pick. That was the last one. He's now a 49er. So I still have all the same questions. Darius Williams' age, Akella Witherspoon age / health, and then all those guys coming off of their rookie contract. You got a couple of UDFAs that played some significant snaps. I don't know if that's a great answer or not. But they're also on 1-year contracts now. So a lot of moving pieces there. So those are my 2 big takeaways.
Let's double click on that quick before I go into kind of my takeaways. Rumors have been swirling kind of since Miami announced that they and Jalen Ramsey were going to, were better off without each other. And then I think it was this morning, Albert Breer of SI and his mailbag kind of brought it to light again that the rumors are kind of real and Miami might be actually okay eating a lot of his salary. Seeing that the Rams didn't take a corner, and I don't even know if they didn't even sign a corner in their UDFA class, did they? So
no.
0 corners added throughout the draft process. Is it imminent that Jalen Ramsey is going to be back in Horns, do you think?
It seems like it. I mean, the number is probably the big sticking point. And I mean, the Dolphins are such a dumpster fire right now. I have no idea what they're doing with their team, with Tyreek Hill and what's happening with Tua and offensive line, defensive line. They've got questions across the board. So, maybe they're just going to, fire McDaniels and start anew in some way, and maybe liquidate a bunch. And maybe Jalen Ramsey is one of those. So I think it's definitely on the table. It's definitely, conversations that have been had with McVay and Snead. That, I mean, I think it's in the works. Is it the right answer? Is it the best answer? He's another guy over 30, played really well last year. But once you get over 30, there's a lot of unpredictability. And that's, why I bring up Witherspoon and Darius Williams, just because of the age, really.
Yeah. He would be probably the best corner on the team if he does come back, but certainly he's not going to be the Jalen Ramsey of that Super Bowl run. But still a very good corner. But I mean, like you said, it just happens. I mean, we've seen it with all the greats that once they cross that kind of line, the decline happens. Now for him, it's been slower, and I think it will be slower. It won't be as steep as drop off. But that being said, I think it's still worth it. I mean, so when they sent him to Miami, what'd they get back? A 3rd and Hunter Long? I think that was it a 3rd or was it a 5th?
That's right.
3rd. So Hunter Long's in Jacksonville now, so they can't send Hunter Long back to Miami. But I want to say they could probably get it done for pretty cheap. We're talking maybe a fifth or later now. If they gave a third 2 years ago, that's going to, the value is going to drop even more. So fourth at best, or fourth at like most value, fifth and lower. So the big thing is his contract. And if the Rams take on a lot of it, or they give even less up, so the Dolphins take on. I mean, when you talk about contracts like that and teams are looking to part ways, it becomes, all right, well, we'll just give you a seventh then, and then you eat the salary. So it's really little, just basically a salary dump. But it feels like, based on not taking any, based on Stafford's contract details finally coming out, saving a little cap, it really feels like Ramsey's coming back to LA. But I know he would want to. So
Yeah, I'm sure he wants to go to a winner. Obviously has a great relationship with the staff. And yeah, I think great, obviously a great fit as well, and a huge team need. So I see no reason they shouldn't chase that.
Yeah. So, okay. So my other thoughts of the draft, besides everything you said, because I agree with the quarterback and the cornerback kind of interesting decisions there. My big takeaway is how much the Rams traded up in this draft. And, that's probably been talked about quite a bit, but it's funny. They've been known for the past few years for recouping as many picks as possible, trading back, always drafting late. And what did they trade up, like 3 times?
3 or 4 times, yeah.
Yeah, 3 or 4 times traded up. So obviously love the guys that they got. You don't trade up unless you don't absolutely love a guy and you would like lose sleep at night for not getting him. So I think there's value in that, showing the premonition they had, and the obviously the value they put in some of these players. They were willing to give up assets to go get them. But also it's just an interesting change of philosophy that they've never really done in this Snead McVay era, typically always trading back. So that was kind of my big takeaway, other than what you already said. We'll get to the players now, but yeah, trading up was very un-Snead like.
Yeah, they went in with 8, came out with 6 picks. Compared to their last 2 classes, as you said, 11 for the last one, 13 for the one before that. So a big step back. Snead was on Pat McAfee's show talking about it, and he talked about how thin this draft class was, and that's the reason they were so aggressive at going up and trading for guys. Is when the talent pool is thin, it creates a lot of variance, but it also creates a lot of desperation, and there were some desperation moves, I guess, to that. The draft class kind of forced their hand to change this philosophy to ensure that they got a bunch of quality guys, and then they go out and get 17 or 18 UDFAs. Yeah. So we may see some kind of Jalen McCullough, kind of Charles Woods, UDFAs, at Omar Spates, the 3 UDFAs. That's all a whole bunch of time on the field last year. So they're going to continue that trend, I guess.
Yeah, this is very true. Which obviously for contractually, and the Rams are so strategic in kind of how they add guys based on obviously comp picks, but then also just based on cap and how the salary cap works. They knew they could save more money with UDFAs and whatnot. But we'll get into that next episode. So, all right, let's get into some of these picks. Let's start with our guy, Terrence Ferguson, tight end out of Oregon. Go ahead.
Well, we got a turd and we got a poo. Yeah. On this draft class. Yeah. So Chris Paul prefers to be called Poo Paul,
and Turd Ferguson, which I don't think Terrence prefers that. I'm just saying that because it's a great name. Yeah. Maybe if we ever have him on the show, we'll ask him, and maybe he'll get highly offended and we'll never say it again. But for now, our buddy Turd Ferguson. Yeah. When this happened, I gave this a C+ grade for the pick, not because of the position. We love that they'd taken a tight end. Obviously, we knew that was something of need. I don't even think Ferguson's like a bad player. For me, it was solely about the fact that I had higher tight ends still available, one being Elijah Arroyo, who I think both you and I like. He was available, goes right after. Also, Will Johnson, obviously not a tight end, but he was still available. We know the Rams didn't end up taking any corners, so whatever they thought about the corner class obviously rings very loudly. But I think Will Johnson, if healthy, is a top 15 pick in this class, and he was available for them at 15. And we know the Rams historically have taken guys with checkered injury past. They've taken that risk based on the value they could get for that. So I was a little surprised by that. So because of that, I gave it a C plus grade. Now that I've let the dust settle, and you get past that and who they pass on and whatever, like I do like the pick. I think he's a really solid player. He gives you some nice versatility at tight end, great size, obviously, great after the catch ability, good catch radius. And so I think he does have a lot of talent. I know McVay talked about him being like a comp to Travis Kelce and Chris Cooley, who he coached during his tight end coaching days with the Washington, at the time, Redskins, now Commanders. And so, obviously they like what they saw out of him and they think they're getting a top end tight end player. What did you think about Turd Ferguson?
I can't help it. Great shout out to a great segment on Saturday Night Live, the Celebrity Jeopardy. That's
Yes,
great.
Will Ferrell.
Will Ferrell playing. Was he playing?
Alex Trebek.
Alex Trebek.
And I think it's
Norm. Is it Norm Macdonald playing?
It's either Norm Macdonald or it's oh man, I'm drawing a blank on his name. Longest Yard.
Burt Reynolds, right?
Burt Reynolds. I think Burt Reynolds might be Turd Ferguson.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, I was in the same boat. A lot of the analysis now is like this seems like a reach. A lot of people had him graded, 40 picks later, in the third round, that kind of grade. But the Rams aren't afraid to go chase a guy, especially if they like what they see. Ted Wynn of The Athletic did a really great kind of breakdown of how he sees him fitting in the Rams scheme. And he sees him as a big slot and then, doing a lot of the dirty work in the run blocking game. And who does that sound like? Well, that sounds a lot like Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp played that kind of 11.5 personnel, where he was able to do, that slot work and a lot of the blocking work. But this is a more traditional role for a tight end. And it's kind of like what it seemed like McVay wanted to do, having Higbee in place, bringing in Gerald Everett in that first draft in 2017. A bit more 12 personnel is probably on the plate. So with that in mind, kind of like how this evolution is going to happen, along with the fact that Tyler Higbee is not long for this football world.
Mm-hmm.
I think, it's a good fit. They have a lot of belief in this guy. And, he's not going to be asked to do a lot of the high end blocking things that Tyler Higbee is going to be asked to do, that Colby Parkinson's going to do as well. Get him back in the proper role that they signed him to be in. So yep. I think, I'm not going to go all the way A+ on this one, just because I feel like they left. You got to look at the context of how the board was falling. But I think he's going to be a quality starter for this team for a long time. Yeah,
well said. And at the end of the day, real quick, it was Norm Macdonald that played the great late Norm Macdonald that played Turd Ferguson. At the end of the day, like, as long as it works out and they're able to get the value that they saw, then who cares if it's a reach? Like, I don't think a single Rams fans out there cares that the Rams, quote unquote, reached on Braden Fisk last year. And I think 31 other teams are probably wishing they would have reached and gone up and got him after seeing what Fisk did this season for the Rams as a rookie. So, but you got to see, obviously, it work out like that. Not every pick works out, as we know in this NFL business. So, but yeah, since I've let the dust settle, I have, I said C+. I think I'll go up to like a B on this overall, just because it is good positional value, and I think he will add a dynamic to this team, to this tight end room that clearly isn't there when Higbee's hurt. And also, if Higbee entering the last year of his contract is not retained, then obviously Ferguson becomes kind of the future of that room, along with Colby Parkinson as a blocking tight end. And then we'll see what happens with Davis Allen and how he can keep kind of developing in that room as well. Next pick in the third round, 90th overall, Josiah Stewart, edge out of Michigan. What do you think about this one? We talked about it on our live, but give me your thoughts now that the dust has settled on Stewart's addition.
Yeah, my opinion really hasn't changed much on him. I think they found themselves in a tough position where a lot of their guys came off between their second and third round pick, and they kind of had to go best player available. Is there a bit of redundancy on the roster? I think so, with Byron Young and he kind of filling the same role. Now, can you have too many pass rushers? Can you get after the quarterback enough? Does he line up as kind of a, inside stunting linebacker role? There's positions for him, to get on the field. But he's undersized, incredible athlete, just like Byron Young. And does this extend their kind of runway with this young defensive line, where I kind of see Byron Young maybe not getting a second contract? I think Kobe Turner, Braden Fisk, and Jared Verse are all kind of making the case to get a second contract, which makes him, Byron Young a bit more expendable. So does this extend that runway for 2 more years where they can have a cheap pass rusher, develop him behind Byron Young, and get him to really cooking by that 3rd year? That's a good strategy. Maybe not a 3rd rounder strategy. That would make it an A+ for me, but I can see the place.
Yeah. I've kind of grown to like this one even more. I originally gave it a B-, and this is one of those, as you alluded to, a spoiled pick, if you will, right? Like, not a position of need, 2 not just starters, but high quality starters in the league that are kind of top end pass rushers. But as you said, you can never use too much pass rush help. These guys don't play 100% of the snaps. You do have a rotation. And so having a talented guy that can come in, develop, gives you that runway, like you're saying, can be more cost controlled for an extra 2 years if they decide, Byron Young 2 years from now when his contract's up, not to re-sign. That gives you that option. But when you look at a lot of these great NFL teams, and Rams are one of them, but when you look at these playoff teams, typically all of them have like a 3rd and 4th pass rusher that can get the job done. And, we talked about them losing,
Michael Hoyt.
Thank you, Michael Hoyt. Talk about them losing Michael Hoyt. So this kind of fills that void. But you still want to have top end talent as your 3rd and 4th pass rusher. When you look at, I always bring the Broncos up just because I followed them closely as a kid. When you look at their 2015 dominant defense that won the Super Bowl, obviously Von Miller and DeMarcus Ware were the 2 names at edge, but they had a guy by the name of Shaq Barrett as their 3rd pass rusher who was pretty damn good and ended up getting a huge contract with Tampa Bay later on. So, I mean, able to rotate those guys is extremely valuable. And in the NFL now, you run these NASCAR packages where you're just throwing like 4 just dogs at pass rushing when you go kind of a thinner, faster lineup on 3rd and long situations. So I think that's where he'll get his playing time first, is on those 3rd and long situations. And then we'll see how his rotation looks with Verse and Young. But yeah, I think it's grown on me. Like, I'll put this up almost to like an A- now, just because of the talent that he has at that value in the 3rd round.
Yeah, 13 sacks with Michigan last year. So really great production there. And, as I mentioned, kind of with like the offense shifting philosophies over the last 1 or 2 years heading into this year, the defense under Shula is different too. Now, he brought in a whole bunch more blitzing than Staley did, than Raheem Morris did. And so, when you lose a guy like Ernest Jones, who is a skilled pass rusher, which Omar Spates was more suited as a gap filler run stopper. That's what I'm seeing with that kind of inside linebacker, blitz package, NASCAR package. I think, they could be very valuable. And, I imagine they're going to continue on kind of that track, just kind of how I see them positioning themselves with this defense.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right, next pick, the Rams trade up 10 picks in order to get Auburn running back Jarquez Hunter. 1 pick before this, so at pick 126, the Houston Texans took my guy, Woody Marks, out of USC, extending the Rams streak of not drafting a USC Trojan. Now, they do have UDFAs at least, but have not drafted a USC Trojan since 2013 when they were in St. Louis and drafted defensive back TJ McDonald. But it's the 8th straight draft. The Rams have drafted a running back, which is the longest current streak in the NFL. I do think, Hunter was a very productive back in the SEC. Last year, he finished with over 1,200 yards, had 8 touchdowns. Still not a true burner. I know that's kind of the thing we wanted to see because of the lack of explosiveness that Kyron Williams has. But he did run a 4.4 40. So he does have, I think, more juice than what the room currently has, and can certainly provide more of a spark, and certainly did that at Auburn in the vaunted SEC. So I'll toss it over to you. But to me, this felt like the trade up. I think they liked the player, obviously, but I think the trade up was because maybe they felt, and we kind of saw it unfold, a slew of running backs start to go kind of in this sequence in the draft.
Yeah, 100%. And I see him as kind of the marriage between a truly explosive back and what they've gone after the last two drafts in Kyron and in Blake Corum. He had the second most explosive rushing plays in college football last year,
Mm.
behind RJ somebody. I've forgotten his name, but
Oh, they got a Central Florida.
probably, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I think probably the headline under the headline is, what does this mean for Kyron Williams' future with the team? They're negotiating a contract extension, not final at this point. Do we head into the season where that's still a big question mark? And do they pull Ernest Jones with him and trade him right before the season, Kyron Williams, that is, if they see Blake Corum making that big step, Jarquez Hunter kind of filling in as well. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. I like the player. I think it's a good pick. Again, like, fourth round running back, I've got no problems with that.
Yeah.
even with a trade up in there.
Yeah. And so just to the point of the back starting to go at the top of the fourth round, you had Bashul Tootin and Cam Scattaboo, my guy, go. Then you had Trevor Etienne go. And then, like I said, Woody Marks right before. So 4 backs taken before. And so it seemed like the Rams, obviously, I think, liked Hunter. And as you mentioned, that explosiveness is a key. Dylan Sampson went shortly after they took him as well in the fourth. So, yeah, overall, I think we both said we knew they were going to take a running back, since they have now 8 years in a row. That's kind of their philosophy and I think, so last thing before we move on, we've both kind of said we don't think they will anyway, but does this for sure signify probably not a second contract coming for Kyron Williams?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
The fumbles, maybe got him in the doghouse, injury prone as well, some red flags, doesn't have that kind of true breakaway speed. So they were really limited. And this guy, he adds a underrated element, which is a special teams acumen as well. Mm-hmm. He can finally be that answer that they've needed, an explosive guy, returning punts and whatnot. So yeah, but I think this is nail in the coffin for Kyron.
Yeah, it seems like, unless he ends up having like an 1,800-yard season this year, which never know. But now with this 2 more young backs with him and Blake Corum, I'm assuming he'll get less reps, but he was one of the most worked running backs in the league last year. But I give this an overall B grade. I think it's a solid pick. 5th round. A lot of fans, Skinny, were not actually happy with this pick. This was my highest graded pick in the whole draft for the Rams. And that is defensive tackle Ty Hamilton out of Ohio State. I give this an A- when it happened. I think it's tremendous value in the 5th round. Again, everyone will point to, oh, you don't need defensive line help. You have Kobe Turner. You have Braden Fisk. You signed Poona Ford. Totally agree with that. But again, at the 5th round, this kind of value, a dude that finished with 51 total tackles, 3.5 sacks, a forced fumble, a fumble recovery on the national championship team, Ohio State. Dane Brugler, I think, gave this guy like a 3rd round grade in his grading scale. So to get him 2 rounds later in the 5th round, it's one of those positions, defensive line, the front 7, you really can never have too many guys, because the fresher you can be, the more effective you're going to be. We see all the time when teams have a great starting 4, but when they have to go to their depth, that's when things leak. That's when the running game gets absolutely exposed. And so having a 3, 4, 5-man rotation that can all bring it, let's say you win a Super Bowl. It's a 17-game season and a 4-game playoff, depending if you're a wild card. That's a 21-game season. You got to get through in order to hoist that Lombardi trophy. So I think, to me, this was their best pick.
It's a really interesting take, because if you look at their depth chart, it's really incomplete at the position. They added a whole bunch of UDFAs here as well to trying to find a solve for this. But, Bobby Brown was the run defender that never wanted to be a run defender. He wanted to be a pass rusher. He's gone, not shockingly to us. You bring in a guy like Poona Ford to be that run stopper. And if you look at his PFF grades and what he did with the Chargers last year, absolutely 100%. He's got on a 3-year contract.
Yep.
But if you look at the rest of the depth chart, and it's not the depth chart, it's the starters. They're actually kind of a liability in the run game, and that's where Hamilton kind of, butters his bread, is in the run game. And you got him on a rookie contract. We'll see what happens with Puna Ford over the next 3 years. But Kobe Turner and Braden Fisk get really pushed around in the running game. So yeah, they kind of had to add at this position, even with Puna Ford. So on those early downs, those run downs, those short yardage situations, goal line stuff, they needed it.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, I think it was a bigger need than a lot of people realized. And so I think this is a fantastic pick. So their next pick was a true absolute need. They waited till the 5th round to fill. They traded back up into the 5th round to make this pick. This one feels, Skinny, universally, fans, media, analysts, as kind of the favorite pick for the Rams of this draft. It's one of my favorite. Like I said, I had Hamilton slightly graded ahead, but I gave this one a B+. And that is, as you alluded to, Chris Paul Jr., linebacker out of Ole Miss. Brugler also had a 3 to 4th round grade on him. So getting him at the end of the 5th round, tremendous value. I think he'll be a day one special team player right off the bat. But certainly a solid defender, played Mike linebacker at Ole Miss, can run the sideline to sideline, can cover, and also can kind of plug holes in the run game, which, as you just talked about, is still a huge concern for this Rams team. And so if the addition of Hamilton and Chris Paul Jr. can potentially aid in that, along with obviously the free agent signing of Puna Ford, now all of a sudden you've put some Band-Aids on that issue. So I think he comes in my opinion, and competes day one on special teams, but it competes day one to potentially start at linebacker. Obviously, they signed Landman. You got Omar Spates coming back to UDFA from last year, but I don't think there's like a lock to start there. So I think he'll have an opportunity. And even if he's not a starter, again, rotations, you're going to get in the game. So I'd pencil him above Troy Reeder already.
So they're taking a really interesting approach that's opposite to their cornerbacks, which is they're throwing a lot of cheap options at this to try to find a solve at this position, which I think it's great. It's a great way to do it. I think, who it seems like Spates is going to be their front runner to have a starting position. Who's going to wear the green dot is a real interesting question. Is it going to be a linebacker? Is it going to be a safety? But one of these guys has to be on the field for 100% of the snaps. And as I was saying with Spates, he's good at the run fits, comes, coverage falls apart, and he's not really quite fast enough to go sideline to sideline. It's not an indictment of the guy. He fills a role, definitely. So they're going to find a guy that can do that. And and Paul is kind of like this, is kind of the opposite of that. Super athletic, but he's just really small. 6'1", 200 and some odd pounds. There's running backs in this league that are bigger than this guy. So, it'll be an interesting experiment to see where and how he fits in. But they're throwing a lot of resources at this for the first time in a little while. And I say that, with the caveat that they don't actually care about the position that much. Landman has had some, really interesting, stats coming out of from the Falcons, but he was kind of replaced. We know what Troy Reeder is. But they have this UDFA, Sean Dolak, who played for Buffalo. Whole bunch of tackles, good size. So there's going to be a good competition, to see who they're going to fill this role with, and no better person than to have Chris Shula kind of having an eye on that as a guy that coached linebackers for a long time. So I think you're right. I think he's probably right up there. I think he's going to have a great role on this team just because of his athleticism on special teams, really.
Yeah. I you hit the nail on the head. I think the competition is wide open. I mean, they're two, obviously Spates ended up starting last year into the season, but heading into last year, their two linebacking starters are not here anymore. Obviously Troy Reeder was in that mix as well, who is back. But I think they go into this year very wide open on who ends up winning that job overall. And I think we'll see a rotation. We see a lot. The Rams kind of run a 3-man rotation. A lot of schematically, they only have one backer on the field, but they kind of rotate the 3 and whatnot. So we'll see how that looks. It's crazy to think that, just was it 3 years ago, they shell out all this money to go bring in, future Hall of Fame linebacker from rival Seattle. and then they ship him off after 1 year because they fell in love with Ernest Jones and thought he was the future, and then they ship him out for whatever reason and contract disputes, and now here we are talking about 5th-round picks and UDFAs about who's going to start.
It still hurts. It still hurts my heart.
All right, with the last pick in the draft for the Rams, 7th round, take a flyer on a receiver, Kanota Mumfield out of Pittsburgh. Finished last year with 813 yards, 5 touchdowns, not a burner, runs a 4.59 40, which, some would say is slow for a receiver. But I think it's plenty fine speed for what they're going to want him to do. He's a good route runner. He's got good quickness, which gives him immediate separation. He just doesn't have that kind of burn speed down the sideline, but can do what I think what the Rams will want him to do in this offense. Typically skinny, I would say, hey, 7th round receiver, special teams player, if he can make it, depth piece. But we've seen with the Rams kind of, if you call it luck or their evaluation, these late round picks end up having quite an impact on the Rams offense. So I think Mumfield might end up getting some shine this year. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, there are question marks about the depth. Obviously we have our top 3 figured out for the receivers, but then after that, it's there. You gotta have some extra receivers on there. And this, I mean, just kind of what you were describing and how Dane Brugler describes him, which is, not doesn't allow with the size or speed, but he is a route running craftsman, and he gets open for his quarterback. His toughness and attention to detail should separate him in training camp. I mean, does that sound like a Rams wide receiver? Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think
Sure
quality pick, and we'll see if he gets on the field for, with Jordan Whittington and it's not a huge depth, but they've got quality guys there, obviously.
Yeah, for sure. He was the only non Big Ten or SEC player they took. He was their lone ACC
Wow,
player
good
they
call.
drafted. The other 5, I mean, it's only 5 of their players, but the other 5 were either Big Ten or SEC, the 2 mega conferences in college football. Yeah, overall, I like it. So overall, what do you give this class grade? It seemed like when you see like pundits give grades, a lot of them go very safe. Like all of them pretty much B plus. I think Mel Kiper gave him a B plus, PFF gave him a B plus, 33rd team B plus. That's a very safe, basically saying like, we don't love it, we don't hate it. It was a good draft. But what do you give it?
Yeah, I'm right there with them, actually. I think,
Yeah.
I think this is a funny time of year. It's like the opposite of free agent signings, where like everybody kind of goes into free agent signings with kind of a negativity. Whereas with draft picks, like hope springs eternal. Like there's gonna be cut ups, all these Twitter guys cutting up highlights, going, "This is the guy that we got." Everybody's got to slow their roll a little bit, take a deep breath, and that's what I'm here to say. I think this is a solid B, just because it's solid. There's no guys that I'm like home run 100%. Future Hall of Famer, I think there's a couple of guys that are going to start, and I think there's going to be a couple of guys that earn good solid rep share. That's any more than that, you're getting greedy.
Yeah. So I'll ruffle some feathers here. Why not? I like the class. Like I like the players. I like the opportunity. We just broke them all down. But being whatever we are, 5 days removed from the draft, like this will change come training camp. I'm not saying this is like my final evaluation, but just 5 days after the dust settles, I'm going to give this a C plus. And again, not because I think these were bad picks, but to me, coming into the draft, there were 3 clear needs the Rams, in my opinion, should have addressed: cornerback, a future quarterback, and linebacker. They got the linebacker, albeit all the way in the 5th round, but I think it was a very high-end 5th round pick. No cornerback. And I'll give them a check the box for quarterback, because while they didn't end up taking one, they end up getting a 1st round pick for next year. So I think they checked that box. So they kind of checked the quarterback box. They checked the linebacker box, I think a little late, but they get a good value pick, and they don't address cornerback. So for that reason, I go C plus. but I do overall like the class. I think it was just more the strategy than maybe I'm being a little critical of. But again, this is going to change in 2 months, so no one burn me at the stake. That's just. I want to ruffle feathers a little bit.
I want also offensive line too. Like when we did our mock draft, I said this isn't enough picks with 8 picks. And I wanted more. I wanted more swings, and I think Warren McClendon. He didn't do great when he was in, but he is an option as Rob Havenstein's eventual successor.
Mm-hmm.
But that's another, cornerback, defensive back across the board. You gotta throw a lot at that position to make it work. Offensive line too, and there's been health questions from left to right. Basically, everybody. Even Kevin Dotson missed some games last year with injury. So, and we'll see what happens at center.
Yeah,
but
yeah, I didn't even say that, but yeah, no additions on the offensive line either. They did get a really good UDFA, which we'll talk about next week, that everyone's really praising. So we'll see if that becomes kind of the Justin Dietich of this year, that maybe gets some reps and playing time. So yeah, overall, I'm not at all trying to stay negative. I do think it was a good class, but I don't want to go chalk and say B plus. I'm going to go C plus, just because I think they had less picks than we thought they should have had, and they started with 8, ended with 6, and I just think they didn't address certain areas. But the 6 they did make, I do like a lot. So no one come firing for me.
Come at him, bro.
Or do come at it. Why not? We can disagree. I mean, obviously disagree. Yeah, comment below your guys' thoughts on the draft. Tons of Rams draft coverage. Skinny T, huge shout out to you. This guy wrote an article for every single draft selection for the Rams, the Chargers, and the Raiders in real time as the picture coming. I got the easy job of updating our 3 trackers, which half the time you would finish yours before I was even done updating the tracker that we did. But so what did that come out to? So it was 6,
26.
Chargers had 9, and the Raiders had
11.
10 picks, 11.
Yeah.
He did 26 draft, but essentially prospect articles in real time.
Yeah, big shout out to Dane Brugler. I credited him in everything, but I leaned on his analysis. He's great. The guy's great.
Yeah, well, especially once you get, we do a lot of other things, not to toot our own horn, but we're not necessarily analyzing 4th and 5th and 6th round picks that we have enough to say on them. But yeah, so great job, Skinny. Thanks everyone that hung out with us throughout the weekend. But yeah, tons of Rams draft content up at LAFBnetwork.com. If you want to get more in tune with that, we got our tracker still up. You can find it in the menu with grades and stuff there, plus all of Skinny's individual, plus all the now Rams news coming out of the pipeline now with all the rumors and analysis. So all that, LAFBnetwork.com. If you have not already, please hit that like and subscribe button right here at the Rams LAFB YouTube channel. Helps us out. We want to keep growing this thing, get it bigger and bigger for next season. And if you're on audio, Apple, Spotify, just search Rams Skinny and you can find our show there. For Skinny T, I am Ryan Dyer. Everyone have a fantastic weekend. Enjoy this Rams draft class. We'll be back talking UDFAs next week.